accurate reporting and the American people get fair and accurate information. Yeah.
Thanks, Kayleigh. Just following up on Kristen's question, China's blocking the World Health Organization from coming in and investigating how this started. Shouldn't external investigators be allowed into Wuhan to determine, one, how the pandemic started, and two, maybe a way that we could expedite finding a cure for this thing?
Look, there's no secret that China stopped U.S. investigators from coming in. It was of paramount importance that we got into China in an expedited fashion, and that didn't happen. With respect to the World Health Organization, they have some questions of their own to answer. The United States, as the president has emphasized, provides about $400 million to $500 million per year to the WHO, compared to China at roughly $40 million a year. But yet the WHO appears to have a very clear China bias. I mean, you look at this timeline, and it's really damning for the WHO when you consider the fact that on December 31st, you had Taiwanese officials warning about human-to-human transmission. The WHO did not make that public. On January 9th, the WHO repeated China's claim that the virus, quote, does not transmit readily between people. That was quite apparently false. On January 14th, the WHO again repeated China's talking points about no human-to-human transmission. They praised China's leadership on the 22nd of January. On the 23rd, they said, and this is incredible, the pandemic didn't represent a public health emergency of international concern. And even on February 29th, you had the WHO saying that when the coronavirus was spreading around the world, they chose to put political correctness first by opposing life-saving travel restrictions. The travel restrictions this president put in place, the travel restrictions that Dr. Fauci praised as saving lives. And you have the World Health Organization opposing a measure that saved American lives. That's unacceptable, especially at a time when the U.S. was providing $400 to $500 million. John.
Kayleigh, this time last week, the president was saying that he was not happy with Georgia's Governor Brian Kemp for beginning the reopening process in the way that he was at the time that he was. A week later, there have been some peaks and valleys in new cases in Georgia, but overall the trend line is down. Do you know what the president's thinking about the Georgia reopening is as of today?
Look, the president is resolute in saying that the states take the lead here. It's the decision of governors to decide what is best for their state. That being said, I talked to the experts. I talked to Dr. Birx. I talked to Dr. Fauci, and they say, rightfully so, this president has always sided on the side of data, which is why he encourages all states to follow the data-driven guidelines to reopening. All states from Georgia on down the line should follow those guidelines, but ultimately it is the decision of the states. And one note I would make about the president, in times of national emergency, we seem to have had a trend in this country where presidents aggregate power at the federal level, but this president has devolved power. He's invested in a principle that I cherish, and I know many others do, which is federalism, and I think that was the right decision.
Has he mentioned how he feels about Governor Kemp in the last few days?
I have not spoken to him about Governor Kemp in the last few days.
As the on the lines of reopening, as the president pushes forward to reopen the country, does that mean he'll be campaigning in those states where that will be reopening?
So I would refer you to the Trump campaign on that question. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for being here, Kayleigh. You mentioned Dr. Fauci a minute ago. Are we going to have any more press briefings with Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx and the health experts, or is the White House kind of shifting the message to focus more on the economy and less on the public health aspect?
Well, let me back up and talk to you a little bit about how we approach disseminating information. When I talk with my colleague Alyssa and we plan out the communication strategy for this White House along with the president and Ben as well, what we do is we say, what is the best mode for the public to receive this information at this time? And we allow the news cycle and the needs of the American people to guide us. And at the moment, what we see happening, and I hinted at this in my gaggle last week, is you have 35 states, and probably more at this point, with plans to reopen the country. Americans are looking to reopening the country. We've had Dr. Birx in several events this week. They've been Dr. Birx and Fauci out on the airwaves. They're really incredible people and have done a great service for this country, but we allow the news of the day to guide us, what the American people need to hear. And right now we're in a reopening phase, which is why you've seen the president this week with CEOs, you've seen him with small business owners, with small business employees, today with some great heroes that have emerged from this pandemic and have done a lot of the hard work. So every day we approach this as, how can we disseminate this information? There's a need for information, which is why I'm here supplementing the efforts of this president to get the message out. I would also note he's the most successful accessible president in history. Took questions twice yesterday, twice the day before. You hear from him quite often, as well as our medical experts.
So is the task force still meeting? I guess what's the role of the coronavirus task force? We still have, hundreds of people a day are dying. So what role does the task force have versus the economic advisory groups?
Yeah, the task force meets regularly. I go to those meetings. I hear them. Dr. Birx, I should say, is meticulously reviewing the data in granular detail. I watch them spend sometimes the upwards of 2 hours in these task force briefings. So those are still ongoing. Rest assured, we want a safe reopening. So we are prioritizing the health of the American people, as well as looking forward to reopening this country.
Yes, thank you, Kayleigh. Back to the DNI statement from yesterday, there is a quote that I'd like you to give me your response to. It said, the intelligence community also concurs with the wide scientific consensus that the COVID-19 virus was not man-made or genetically modified. This was from the DNI statement. How do you see this statement? How do you understand this? And also there was a piece in the New York Times that said senior Trump administration officials have pushed intelligence agencies to hunt for evidence to support the theory that COVID-19 was made in a Wuhan laboratory.
I can assure you that no one is pressing the intelligence community to come to a determination. The intelligence community statement stands. It's in perfect concert with what the president said. So, I encourage the media to convey the facts to the American people, which is that we're in line as an administration and we stand by the intelligence community, and that is in complete concert with what the president said yesterday. See, who haven't I gotten to? Oh, I've gotten to almost everyone. Okay, so we're in round 2. That's great. Yes.
Thank you. Today, former Vice President Joe Biden denied allegations of sexual misconduct against him. Does President Trump take him at his word, given that, as the president has said, he has denied allegations against himself?
Well, what I would say is that we are pleased that the former vice president has decided to go on the record. It took him less than, 16 hours to follow the advice of the president of the United States and come out and publicly address those claims. So, we're glad to see that he's on the record on this.
Let me just ask you about something the president said moments ago in an interview. He said that Tara Reade is, quote, far more compelling than anything they had with respect to Brett Kavanaugh. What did he mean by that? What is more compelling?
That's the president's assessment, so I would point you back to his words. I think it was a grave miscarriage of justice, what happened with Justice Brett Kavanaugh. There's no need for me to bring up some of the salacious, awful, and verifiably false allegations that were made against Justice Kavanaugh. That was an embarrassment for the Democrat Party to have dragged the name of a very respectable man through the mud like that. So I'll leave it at that.
Yes, Kayleigh is the radio puller. I'm asking this on behalf of our colleague. There's word the decision to release Michael Cohen from prison to home confinement due to COVID-19 has been reversed. Did the White House directly or indirectly intervene here?
No. So absolutely not, I would say there. But I am glad that you brought up justice, and because, look, there's, again, a case of injustice that is yet to be brought up today, but I certainly would like to bring it up, and that's the case of General Michael Flynn. What we've all learned from that should scare every American citizen. The fact that you had Jim Comey admitting in December of last year that he violated a protocol by directing agents to confront Flynn, something that he would not, quote, have gotten away with under previous administrations. The FBI told Flynn he didn't need a lawyer when they came to meet with him. McCabe told FBI agents that he didn't think Flynn was lying, and then all of that information we've learned over the last few months and years culminates in the fact that we have a handwritten FBI note that says, quote, we need to get Flynn to lie, quote, and get him fired. There was an unfair target on the back of General Michael Flynn. It should concern every American anytime there's a partisan pursuit of an individual, and that's certainly, at least those questions are raised with regard to General Michael Flynn, an honorable man who served his country. John.
Yeah, Kayleigh, on that, when the president fired Michael Flynn, he said he was doing so because he had lied to the vice president and he had lied to the FBI. So, given all that you've just said, isn't it still true? Doesn't the president still believe that Michael Flynn lied to Vice President Pence and lied to the FBI?
Well, first, let me address that. Vice President Pence is on the record about this. He said he's inclined to believe that Flynn did not intentionally mislead him. And I guess I would turn the question on you and just ask, does it trouble you that the FBI said, we got to get Flynn to lie? Doesn't that trouble you as a journalist? And not only that, as an American citizen?
Well, it's certainly something worth reporting. It's not my job to say
Absolutely.
whether or not it's troubling, but the bottom line is the president said point blank that Flynn lied to the FBI and to the vice president. And I'm just asking a very direct question. Does he still believe that Michael Flynn lied to the FBI and lied to the vice president?
And again, I'd point you to the vice president's statement that he's inclined to believe that Flynn did not intentionally mislead him. And I'm asking back that all of you in your coverage endeavor to report what is a very scary story when the FBI is saying, let us get someone to lie. I've seen very scant coverage of that. It's a story worth reporting and a story that I hope the American people, if you haven't heard it yet, are getting to hear for the very first time.
Does the
Chanel?
president think he lied still?
Thank you, Secretary McEnany. Going back to the South China Sea, we had an issue come up this morning where you had the USS Barry crossing international maritime waters, and then this is in the South China Sea, and Chinese officials are saying that this will be a dead-end endeavor. Has the president spoken with any side on the Chinese as far as what the United States is going to continue doing? Is the U.S. Navy going to just ignore these threats and keep going through these international waters? What are your responses to China's increasing aggression in the South China Sea again?
Yeah, I have no news to report as to the president's conversations, and for the specifics of that, I would redirect you to the NSC. Yes.
Thanks. In the same podcast interview, the president said that Democrats would, quote, have to give us a lot for aid to states. I'm wondering if you have any idea of what specifically the White House or the president is asking for, and secondly, what you'd say to somebody like Governor Cuomo, who says, the president's already told me, a few weeks ago that he would support this type of assistance, and why are we bailing out, airlines or defense contractors, but not the states that pay teachers or first responders?
Well, first, you brought up Governor Cuomo, so I just thought it's a good time to remind everyone that Governor Cuomo has praised the president's response in this COVID-19 crisis, saying that what the president has achieved is a phenomenal accomplishment, and we thank Governor Cuomo for those very kind words. But on that note, with regard to funding to states, Phase 4 is something that we want to start negotiating on immediately and get to work on. The president has said, look, I will certainly look to consider helping states who have coronavirus reasons for the financial situation they find themselves in, but he doesn't want this to be an excuse for decades and decades of bad Democrat governance that have run some of these states into a financial predicament. So he has mentioned that in terms of the types of things he wants to see in this Phase 4. I don't want to get ahead of the negotiations, but I do want to emphasize that he has mentioned sanctuary cities. This is a really important issue that has cost American lives. Last year, our brave ICE officers arrested more than 120,000 criminal aliens charged with nearly 10,000 burglaries, 5,000 sexual assaults, 45,000 violent assaults, 2,000 murders, and in the last year, egregiously, 5,000 human trafficking episodes. So American lives matter, our brave ICE men and women matter, and it's something that he's mentioned he'd like to see in a Phase 4.
I mean, you raised that, and the president's been kind of vague about this. Are you explicitly conditioning state aid on states or cities not saying that they would have sanctuary city policies?
No, I'm not. No, not conditioning anything, but saying that is a negotiation item that the president will certainly bring up.
Thanks very much. So the president has in the past denied any of the allegations from the many women who have accused him of sexual misconduct. But per that podcast today, he seemed to suggest the allegations that Tara Reade has raised are more, what do you say, credible than the ones against Brett Kavanaugh. What about the allegations that were raised against him, however? Why should the public, or what makes them any less credible than the allegations from Tara Reade?
The president has swiftly denied all of these allegations that were raised 4 years ago. He has always told the truth on these issues. He's denied them immediately, and you're bringing up issues, like I said, from 4 years ago that were asked and answered, and the American people had their say in the matter when they elected President Trump as president of the United States. But, the media, leave it to the media to really take an issue about the former vice president and turn it on the president and bring up accusations from 4 years ago that were asked and answered in the form of the vote of the American people.
Can
Just come back, Kayleigh, to John's question, because Kellyanne Conway spoke to this the other day and suggested that two things could be true at the same time. We now have the Vice President saying it's his belief that General Flynn may have unintentionally misled him. That's now 3 years after the fact. But the two things that could have been true at the same time were that Flynn lied to the Vice President and also lied to the FBI. If you remove the FBI piece of that, would the President still have fired Michael Flynn for his belief that he lied at that point to the Vice President?
I mean, I'm not going to engage in a hypothetical, and that's essentially what that would be. But what I would say is echo yet again that this was a grave miscarriage of justice. I am very glad that the FBI thought to keep a paper trail, because what many have said for a very long time, pointing to the first few facts I shared with you, culminating in that handwritten note, I'm glad they kept such good documentation of their intent to slow walk General Flynn into a trap and to essentially create, as I mentioned, a grave miscarriage of justice. So FBI, at least we can thank you for the great note-taking.
Let me follow up on that, though. John does bring up the point that General Flynn pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI.
I'm not going to get involved in what was a matter
Miscarriage of justice, though, in a sense.
Do you not consider it a miscarriage of justice when you have the FBI writing, "We want to get someone to lie"? Is that a miscarriage of justice?
But in the end, he pleaded guilty, and then that's...
You hesitated because you know what the answer is. The answer is yes.
That's up to a lot of other people to decide.
And I would encourage the media to cover it, because I've watched a lot of your networks, I've read a lot of your papers, I've seen a whole lot of scant information about Michael Flynn, when there was a whole lot of speculation about Russia, culminating in $40 million of taxpayer money being lost, and the complete and total exoneration of President Trump. Thank you guys so much. I'm going to cut this short now and go see my little 5-month-old here in a few hours. And let me just say this. The president at 5 p.m. leaves today for Camp David. It's going to be working weekend. He'll be talking with heads of states, with elected officials. We have a great event coming up this afternoon. And of course, everyone should watch the Fox News Town Hall with the president from 7 to 9 p.m. It'll be can't miss television, much like the highly rated President Trump coronavirus task force briefings have been. Thank you.
Thank you.
Who will be with us?